Welcome everyone today to today's webinar, A Century on Ice, celebrating 100 years of UNH hockey. My name is Ken LaValle, and I'm a member of the UNH Alumni Association Board of Directors. The UNH Alumni Board of Directors is a dedicated group of alumni leaders who support and strengthen the University of New Hampshire community through engagement, advocacy, and strategic initiatives. Today, we'll step onto the ice and into history as we celebrate a century of Wildcats hockey in this special virtual event. Join our panelists as they share unforgettable stories, legendary moments, and the enduring legacy of UNH hockey over the past 100 years. Now I'm going to turn it over to our moderator to begin the program, Mike Murphy, Associate Athletic Director for Marketing and Communications.
Thank you, Ken, and thanks, everybody. What an honor it is to be part of this event, 100 years of hockey. We'll cover it all in the next hour here inside the Whittemore Center at Key Auto Group Complex, and the history wall is behind me, but the people who are joining us will really tell the tale of their time at UNH, their connection to UNH hockey now, and all from different aspects of the program. So it should be a lot of fun. A reminder, there is a chat function. It is not live during the event, but later on, we'll be taking some of the questions that you can type in, and we'll filter through and find some questions to add later on. But a lot of the topics, hopefully, of interest to you will be covered here. Let's start from the class of 1983, men's hockey alum, Andy Brickley.
Thanks, Murph. Hello, everybody, and welcome. It's a pleasure to be here, an honor to be here. It's great to be among all of you. Yeah, as a way of an introduction, I was in the class of 1983, which meant I was a freshman in 1979. I think it's important to note that I grew up in a town called Melrose, just about 10 miles north of Boston Garden. And I bring that up because Melrose has a special connection to the University of New Hampshire. And as we go along, maybe that'll be even revealed a little bit more. So I graduated from high school at 17. So I went to college as a true 18-year-old freshman, which is a far cry from what we witnessed today. And that was a major learning experience for me when I finally retired from playing pro hockey and kind of got into the television business, as I'll touch on. I had to relearn what was going on, within the grassroots of this great game that we play, and why people were 20-year-old freshmen when I was just turning 18. But that is an aside. I left school early. I only went 3 years. I was drafted after my freshman year by the Philadelphia Flyers. Mr. Irrelevant, by the way, the last pick in the entire draft. There were 21 teams in the NHL that year. There were 10 rounds, and do the math, I went 210th. They took a chance on me, and I ended up leaving after my junior year because I thought I was ready to step right into the National Hockey League. So only 3 of my 4 years scheduled at UNH did I complete. I was an economics major when I was a student athlete. I was hoping for a finance major, which was not provided, and I thought econ would be the closest. I thought I was going to make some money someday, and I wanted to know what to do with it to make sure I preserved it, because it's not what you make, it's what you keep. So I ended up playing about 11 years in the National Hockey League. I was pro for 12, and then upon retirement, I got into the media business. I was fortunate to play 4 years with the Boston Bruins. Those years changed my life as far as what was to come in a second career. I did a year of radio, and then I stepped into the television booth, and I've been doing that ever since. So that was from 96 until today. So that kind of catches you up with my career, my connection with UNH, and what has happened since I left UNH.
Terrific. Thank you, Brick. Great to have you on. Let's turn to Brandy Fisher-Bailey from the class of 1998.
Hello. Thanks for having me on. It's an honor to be asked to do this today. So for me, I graduated in 1998. So I was at the University of New Hampshire from 1994 to 98. Played for Coach Karen Kay. I was an exercise science major in the Health and Human Services department. Was now currently, had been in, left UNH, played on the U.S. national team for 4 years. Upon, my retirement from hockey, I got involved in, I used my exercise science degree to get involved in medical device sales and cardiology sales. And did that for some time. Ended up having two amazing girls. And that sort of fostered me into, or sort of the catalyst to get me back into hockey and coaching hockey and, grassroots hockey and girls hockey. So have been coaching at the club level and high school level for the last 15 years, and currently the head coach at Cushing Academy.
Awesome.
And also working as the associate director of admissions there. Reside in when we're here in Duxbury, Massachusetts, and that's it. That's my catch up. So
Terrific. Great to have you here, Brandy. We pass your jersey in the lobby of the Whittemore Center every single day as the inaugural winner of the Patty Kazmaier Award.
Yeah.
Now coaching, somebody else who knows something about coaching from the class of 1972. We welcome Dickie Milley.
Hey, Mike, it's great to be here. And obviously, I'm flattered to be on this panel, especially with this group. I'm a Melrose guy as well. As Andy talked, there's probably 7 or 8 guys that played at UNH, along with my former coach, Coach Holt, another Melrose guy. So there's a great history there, as Andy referred to earlier. I'm a 1972 graduate, a phys ed major, and I was fortunate to, after graduation, get into the teaching field. I went to Melrose as an elementary phys ed teacher for 2 years before Coach Norton, Bob Norton, got me the head job, and he literally got me the head job at Watertown High School. And I was a biology teacher at Watertown High School for 11 years. Before moving on to Providence College, Mike McShane, the legendary coach from Norwich and Providence, hired me as his assistant, where I met Ellen's husband, Jim, as one of my former players at Providence College. And I was there for 3 years before Bob Cullen, the late Bob Cullen, brought me back to UNH. And unfortunately, he passed with a serious heart disease. And I was fortunate to become the head coach at UNH for 28 years. So I'm thrilled to be on this panel. I look forward to the discussions, and thanks.
Terrific, Coach. And you mentioned her briefly. Now we introduce her from the class of 1991. Welcome to Ellen Weinberg Hughes.
Thanks so much, Mike. And likewise, I'm thrilled to be on this panel with the 3 of you or the 4 of you. And what a wonderful thing to do for the UNH hockey community. I come from an unusual background. I do not come from Melrose. I grew up. Yeah, I grew up in Dallas, Texas, and if I had a penny for the times that people ask me, how did I get to UNH from Dallas, Texas? So I had a brother that played hockey up at Bowdoin, and I was a soccer player being recruited everywhere, and hockey was my passion as well. And I grew up doing what my brother, wanting to do what my brother did, and I played with the boys in Dallas. Believe it or not, there was pretty good youth hockey. And UNH was one of those schools that, what a blessing. They were before their time in offering opportunities for female athletes. So I was recruited as the first scholarship soccer class. And I, believe it or not, walked onto the hockey team because they were fully funded at the time. They were, all scholarships and recruited players. And a girl from Dallas going to play hockey at UNH was unheard of. So Russ McCurdy was nice enough to say after my soccer season, he would give me a tryout. So I went on to play soccer and hockey there, and I thought I was going to never leave. Unlike Andy, who left after 3 years, I finally left after 7 years. So 5 years undergrad, I had an injury and I redshirted my junior year, then came back and played 2 years. Then I was fortunate enough, again, because of the school and the wonderful opportunities that they offered, to do a graduate assistant program under Dr. Steve Hardy, who created the program, and he touched so many of our lives, our hockey players and athletes' lives. And I did my undergrad as sports communication and my postgrad in sports management and administration. I played on the U.S. national team in 1992. And again, I was lucky enough to wear a U.S. jersey. We were hoping it would be sanctioned in the Olympics in 1994. And it wasn't until 1998 that the IHF sanctioned women's hockey. And so at that point, I was fortunate enough to cover it for CBS, and I worked in television for a long time, and I've just stayed in hockey in one way or the other my whole life. I currently, and I'll quickly finish this, sit on USA Hockey's foundation board, which is a wonderful board. And I also work with the US women's national team as a development consultant.
Fantastic. And yes,
Fantastic.
I think that penny is worth it for everybody here to find out what the journey is getting to UNH. I want to stick with you, Ellen, for this question, because what did you know about the University of New Hampshire, in particular the hockey program? As you said, there are other sports that people were following you, but growing up in a time where opportunities had to be scarce, how did UNH become something you knew about other than your brother being nearby?
Well, what was interesting, and people don't realize this, is even for the sport of soccer, there was only about 40 schools across the country. There are well over 300 now offering women's soccer at the Division I level. So UNH was forward thinking in that. And so I was looking at them for soccer because of hockey. And the hockey program was the best in the country. And so to be able to walk on and make that team, that was my hope. I had to get the late Bob Johnson was a family friend. I used to go to his hockey school in Aspen, Colorado. I had to get him from the University of Wisconsin in those days to make a call to even get a tryout. That's how storied this program was. And if you think about me coming in 1986 as a freshman, again, I was like Andy, times have changed. I had turned 18 in July. But you think about the fact that they had been playing women's hockey since 1977. Like UNH was a powerhouse in all sports. The year before I came, they won the national championship in women's lacrosse, which people never realize or think about or really celebrate.
And almost won again, right? It came very close again. Unbelievable lacrosse program. Well, Brandy, you come just a few short years later. What was your story in following after what Ellen had done with her teammates?
Yeah. So, I mean, same, Ellen, I understand, like 100% get what you're saying. When, I was in upstate New York playing boys hockey because there really was an opportunity. I grew up in a small town called Potsdam where Clarkson and St. Lawrence had this big men's rivalry, but there was no women's hockey. And I was fortunate enough to go to a camp in Minnesota, like a U.S. development camp. Ellen, I think you were there. I literally think you were there in Duluth. You were with the older group. And I can remember meeting Karen Bai. And, I was obviously 4 or 5 years, 6 years younger than her, but me wanting to be able to do what she did. And she was at UNH. And I remember going back and telling my parents, I want to go to UNH. I want to play at UNH. It was something that I had a goal or, an opportunity that I had, that I was, really, working hard to get to. So I fortunately was able to go to Governors, which is a boarding school not too far from UNH. And, ended up playing Aspet Valley, which was one of the few clubs at the time. But one of the more, one of the stronger ice hockey clubs for women or for girls. And, we played UNH. And I think that's how I ended up getting, the opportunity to play. Coach Karen Kay, the coach at the time. And my hockey coach was Kush Shadu, who I know he's involved with USA Hockey still. That's sort of how it came together, and just being able to play there. So I can't get over the change from 1994 to 1998, and sort of 94 being the we didn't have a rink to play in, but 95 the Whittemore Center opening, and then 96 winning the ECAC championships, and then fast forward to 1998 when there are so many great things happen, like the 1998 Olympic gold happened for USA Hockey. UNH had their first women's national NCAAs, which fortunately we're lucky to be a part of and win. They introduced the Patty Kazmaier Award in 1998. So again, like so many great things happened in the period of 1994 to 1998. And it was sort of, just a really fun year to be a part of. So, I mean, again, like it's crazy how far hockey has come. since, 1994, 1998, and even today. So it's been fun. And I know that UNH has been a big part of that. So
The women's hockey program comes around in 1977,
Yeah.
and the men's program goes back to 1925, hence the 100 years. So Coach Emili, being a Melrose guy, what was your UNH experience? Why did you become a Wildcat?
Well, it's interesting. I was going to go to BU. It was all said and done. Basically, Bob Crocker at the time was the assistant coach at BU, and I was after graduating from Melrose. I played at New Preparatory School called New Prep, which was really a hockey factory in itself. I think they had 3 teams there and some great players from high school doing their post-grad year. And we went up to play UNH. And back in those days, freshmen could not play varsity. So all of the college teams had a freshman team that our prep school would go and play, whether it was at Dartmouth or UNH. And having gone up to UNH, and I had a pretty good game at UNH, Ruby Orkman, who was a great coach at UNH prior to Coach Holt, recruited me, and I went up there for a weekend and Snively Arena, lively Snively. BU didn't even have its own rink. They were playing in the old Boston Arena, which is Northeastern's home arena. And once I got up to UNH and saw the campus and the atmosphere at Snively Arena, I said, I'm in. So I chose to go to UNH. Obviously, I played with some very, very talented players. One of the great players, Louis Fergon. And if you look at the record books, he only played 3 years, and I think he scored somewhat like 98 goals during his 3 years, but he was a tremendous player. I played on his right wing, and all I had to do was skate, get the puck, and get it to him, and picked up quite a few assists. So I had a great time along with John Gray, another great player that played at UNH. And my experiences as a player were tremendous.
Well, Brick, you might have been Mr. Irrelevant when it came to the last pick of the NHL draft, but how about when you were in high school coming to college? How highly touted and wanted were you by Coach Holt and the Wildcats?
Yeah, it seems to be a common theme no matter what level you looked at my career. My years in high school as a 10th grader, our high school was 10, 11, 12. And as a 10th grader, I played JV hockey. And in fact, my coach was Jimmy Emili, Dickie's brother. So maybe that's where some of the good learning started for me. I was able to make the varsity my junior year as a 3rd pair defenseman. And then as a senior, I was playing 1st pair D, and about halfway through the year, we were having a hard time scoring goals, and I was able to break the puck out with ease. So said, well, maybe we need to get him some more touches with the puck in the offensive end of the game. So they moved me up front, and then I just kind of broke out. So I would say I was a bit of a late bloomer when it came to high school. And because I was a late bloomer, I wasn't really sought after by a lot of D1 schools. Technically I was a walk-on at UNH, but I remember David O'Connor coming to my house because he saw something in me, and he was recruiting for UNH. And he sat down with me and my parents, and basically my mother said, Andrew's going to Harvard. And if he doesn't get into Harvard, he's going to go to Williams, or he's going to go to Trinity, or he's going to go to Middlebury. He's not going to go to the University of New Hampshire. And, and I felt bad for Dave making the visit when he didn't get what he was looking to get. So as it turns out, I did not get into Harvard. And I had a visit with the legendary Bill Cleary on a recruiting weekend. And he said that I was a borderline student in regards to getting into Harvard. And the only way I was going to get in was through the help of the hockey program. And he frankly thought I wasn't good enough to play Division I. And that resonated with me. And I remember going home and my parents asked me how'd it go. I said, not so good. And I pleaded with my father to let me go to UNH to see if I could play D1. And I'm to this day forever grateful that my parents allowed me to go to UNH. So that Mr. Irrelevant theory or, theme continued because I went into UNH and I had to try to make the team. And for the first month and a half, 2 months, September, October, early November, wherever it was, I was 5th line. I was getting dressed in an auxiliary locker room. I wasn't even in the big room. And my games were practices. My games were when we scrimmaged. And I had to show Coach Holt and everybody else that I could play at this level. But I needed to grow. I needed to get better. My skating game wasn't up to D1, standards. But I had the opportunity because we had our own rink. We had Snively Arena. We had 2 hours of practice every day that was available to us. When I was at Melrose, and Dickie, you remember this, there was the old Melrose Hockey Town, which didn't exist when I was in high school. We were practicing up on Route 1 at Saugus Hockey Town. School, we got at 2:30. We were on the ice at 3, which meant you were lucky to start at 3:10, and then the Zamboni came on at 3:50. You were lucky to have 45 minutes of practice on a daily basis. So when I went to UNH and I had that ice time and I had that availability and I had the coaching and I had the desire to try to keep up with the guys that were so much better than me, things started to happen. So that late bloomer theme again, I had a good freshman year. Once I finally got an opportunity to play, they put me in a non-league game against Air Force just to see what I would do against competition. Air Force wasn't strong. I had a big game. I think I had 7 points or something like that the first game. And then I got an opportunity and I never came out of the lineup. And then we got better as a team my sophomore year. We were really good my junior year. We went to the Final Four. It wasn't the Frozen Four at the time. And then I was an All-American on an individual award basis. So to go from a walk-on with an asterisk to become an All-American, it's a tribute to the guys I played with, the coaching I got, the opportunity I got, and it was all provided by the University of New Hampshire. And I'm forever grateful for that.
Belong where you are in the Hall of Fame, class of 1998. Great story, Brick. And I think people want to hear about the mentors. All of you had Charlie Holt, certainly for both of you, and then we'll talk about Russ McCurdy and Karen Kay. But Brick, I'll stay with you for that. What was Charlie Holt's impact? Maybe something you can tell us about him, and then I'll pass it over to Coach Emili for the same gentleman.
I thought he was a genius. I had such a belief in my own ability, and a lot of it was based on my ability to process the game. If you weren't the best skater, boy, you better think the game in order to be in the right place at the right time or ahead of schedule. And I was so interested in the intricacies of the game and why the game went the way it went. And that continues today in the job that I have. And when I went to UNH and Charlie would experiment with things. We were always a better second half team because he had to see it, apply what he was watching and then what he believed would make us a better team. But he valued the puck, I would watch a lot of college hockey when I was in high school. They had the game of the week on, and I always liked to watch UNH play because they played with the puck. They weren't a dump and chase team. They weren't a rock 'em, sock 'em, forecheck. Let's, dump it in and get it back. Let's hang on to the puck. I remember watching the Red Army team and the Russians. They would hang on to the puck when they made line changes. I mean, that stuff's in the game today, but it wasn't in the game back in the late 70s and early 80s, but it was in Charlie's game. So I loved the way he thought the game, the way he valued the puck, how creative and innovative he was, things he was willing to try, the different systems that we had. He challenged you. He challenged you to learn the game and know the game and then execute the game. And that had a major impact on me because it really appealed to the way I saw the game.
Coach Emili, I guess you're forever intertwined with Coach Holt. You're a two-time Hall of Famer as an athlete and a head coach, but I'm sure Charlie Holt, you hold an even higher esteem.
What Brick, I can only add to what Brick said. I mean, he was a wonderful person, a great guy. He was an innovator, and it probably took me 2 years to figure out what he was teaching. But that's who he was. We wanted to be in the offensive zone, handle the puck, regroup. He did a forecheck system called the center left wing lock, which he was famous for. But you really learned how to play the game when you played for Coach Holt. And I was fortunate, along with Brick, to play with some pretty good players I had mentioned earlier. But he was pretty special. I had a high school coach, Henry Hughes, who played at Dartmouth, who was very similar to Coach Holt in his coaching. It wasn't, physical. It was. We went and played all other schools. We never had like practices and doing drills. We just played the game, and he taught us the game. So I was comfortable playing for Coach Holt once I figured out what the system was And it was a lot of fun to play for him, and he was a great person.
Ellen, Russ McCurdy, of course, passed away, unfortunately, just about a year ago. Pioneer when it came to women's hockey, and you're a head coach. What can you tell us about an impact he had on your life?
Well, I just think that people don't, most people know how successful he was. In his first 4 years, they went undefeated. Think about that. He was a phenomenal player at BU in his time. If pro hockey was it what pro hockey has been for the last 10 years, he probably would have had a 20-year career. Post playing at BU, he went to war for a while, so he was a throwback that had so much passion for the game. His overall record, I had to look it up, was 264, 36, and 10. Everything that Dickie and Andy say about Coach Holt, you can say the same for Coach McCurdy. I mean, his knowledge for the game and what he taught us still holds true today. His principles, his fundamentals, his ideas for the game would still work today as far as your skill sets go, and the way he wanted to play with the puck and how he valued the puck. And the things that he let us do and be creative is the reason we all had success, not just in college, but post-college. And then I think about the lessons that he taught us off the ice, and the camaraderie that he created within the locker room, and how important that was for us to be a team. And it was all about team, and it was about each individual, and how he made everybody feel important no matter what your role was on the team. And then I think about the life lessons that he gave us and that I passed on to my kids. And, it was having everything in line off the ice, was starting your day. If you want to start your day successful, then make your bed. I still make my bed today, and I laughed with my husband today about Russ over that. And I think all those messages, when you're with, whether it's young women or young men, you have the ability as a mentor and as a coach to really make a difference in their life. And I think he cared about us off the ice as humans first, and he stressed the academics even more than athletes on the ice. And I think they go hand in hand when you look at the men's and women's programs today that are having success.
Thank you for sharing that. And we lead it to you, Brandy, because you were with Karen Kay, who you mentioned earlier. It culminates in the national championship in 1998. What can you tell us about your relationship with Coach K?
I mean, so it's funny. So Coach K, so when I came to UNH, she recruited me. She was the first female coach that I'd ever had, and, at a time when there just weren't a lot of female coaches. And I can remember thinking, I truly remember thinking, wow, this is really cool. And, there was, she was an amazing coach, and she supported, the team, our team. And she was, what I think set her apart from any coach that I've ever had, and sort of what I learned from her, is that, she truly cared about making sure that we felt important on campus. That, women's hockey was sort of new to, there wasn't, it was like 6 or 7 programs at the time. And I can remember showing up at UNH and feeling like we were the cat's meow, like we were a part of something really big. And for that, I will always be grateful for her, and, she did everything she could with the resources that she had. And she built a wagon, we were, I think my freshman year, we had, 6 or 7 freshmen, from all over the country that were, legit hockey players. And I think, the success, if you look at the success that she had, the teams winning, my freshman year in 94, and then 95 winning the ECAC championships, and, just leading this, this amazing team through, to a national championship in, 1998. Forever, I will forever be grateful. I, have, stayed mildly in touch with her. But would, want her to know, and want the UNH community to know that, she was a huge part of the women's history, and a huge part of the game, and a huge part of why UNH women's hockey is what it is today. I think that, she gave so much to the program. So forever grateful. And, when I coach today, whether I'm coaching young kids or young girls or coaching, high school kiddos, my biggest thing is wanting the kids to know that we care about them and care about their sport and care about the women's game. And, I think that's something that I sort of picked up from her. So she's great.
Sharing that, no doubt.
Yeah.
Hall of Fame coaches are all Hall of Famers. Brandy class of 2005 at UNH, Ellen class of 2012. And as much of an impact as coaches can have and developing what your leadership style is, the real bonds I think people want to know about are your teammates, because they're teammates in the locker room, on the ice, and for the rest of your life. You're UNH Wildcats from those years together. Ellen, I'll begin with you because you used the word camaraderie. I know a lot of you had to come back to celebrate / mourn the loss of Coach McCurdy, but can you talk about how you stayed in touch with your Wildcat teammates and how much UNH is the reason why?
Well, I have to say across the board with soccer and with hockey, like I had a mix of players. Our hockey class was very small, and I've stayed in touch with all of them. Lauren Prisco, who's in the area, and she came back, and Andrea Hunter came back. Heidi is in Alaska as a firefighter, but we've all stayed in contact. And I just think that it was a unique time. I had a couple of my soccer teammates that were in my wedding, and I still get together bi-yearly with all of them. But I look across the board with all the classes, the different classes, and how tight everybody is, and just even via Facebook. And we're so excited to see each other no matter what your class was. And we just have that bond, and I think we all share the same stories, and we have all had the same experiences. And it doesn't matter if it was your class or it was Brandy's class. If you run into a UNH Wildcat, and I'm sure Andy and Dickie, you guys feel the same way, it's a family.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the class is. There's something special about UNH. And once you put that jersey on and once you're a Wildcat, you're always a Wildcat.
So true.
And Brick, you're synonymous with the Boston Bruins. You're in our living rooms every year. And I still tell people, hey, he was a UNH guy. And they go, really? It's great that we can brag about what you've done, and you were the voice all year long of the 100-year memories. But the fact that you keep coming back, why? Like, what is it about UNH that you stay so connected?
Yeah, it's the bonds that I made when I played there. And, and I played two sports. It wasn't just hockey. So I was fully immersed in baseball as well. It was a game that I loved, that I still love today. But it's the hockey relationships, really. I love coming to the golf tournament every summer because we really have a good turnout in terms of when I was there. The 3 years I was there, whether you were a freshman when I was a junior or I was a freshman when they were juniors, if you have an opportunity to come back and have that camaraderie and see each other and catch up on each other's lives, you might not stay in touch on a day-to-day basis or a month-to-month basis for that matter. But when you see a guy yearly and you're able to connect and you're able to reminisce and the fond memories and the shared goals you had when you were teammates, because it's the ultimate team sport. You have to have a great team in order to have success. You could have a couple of great players, but that's not going to carry you too far in this sport. So that's the stuff that stays with me. And when I think about my time at UNH, a guy like Jay Miller. So Jay and I were teammates in Boston. We're still very good friends today. He lives on the Cape. I see him a lot. I play his golf course. But we were teammates first and foremost at UNH as freshmen. We were in the same class. We experienced coming into UNH on a down year. So in '79, in the spring of '79, they had a wagon. They should have won the national championship. They were that good. But then 10 guys leave, through graduation or other means. So now it's opportunity for these new guys coming in. And I was in that group coming in, whether you're recruited or not recruited, you had an opportunity. And now you really have to come together as a group in order to improve as a team. And we weren't very good our first year. We were relying on guys that weren't ready to be Division I impact players. But then you grow as a team, and now you're much better your second year. But we still had to win the last game of the regular season at BU in overtime to get into the tournament. And so many things have, caused random thoughts in my head when I'm listening to Brandy talk and Ellen talk, when they're talking about soccer and whatever, it's lacrosse or going to Clarkson and St. Lawrence. We had to play Clarkson, the #1 seed that second year in Clarkson. You know how hard that was back then to go in there and try to win? We lost a 1-goal game. We gave it everything we had. So we had growth. And then we were one of the best teams in the East my third year. You know, a dominant team because of the growth and because of the shared relationships and the bonds that you build. You know, I played with a couple of upperclassmen as a freshman when they were trying to figure out that I could play the game. It was Barth and Barman and Brickley. It was the B line, you know, and we were pretty good. We were pretty good on a very mediocre team at best. But then the next 2 years, my center was Danny Forget. You know, we talk about the connection. Melrose to UNH, drafted to UNH from Canada, from north of the border, was a major connection. And he was my center for the next 2 years. 1 year is with Chris Pryor, you know, one of the few guys that came from out west, we'll call it, from Minnesota to come to UNH. He came in at 185 pounds, 6'2" right wing that was a goal scorer. He left UNH as a stay-at-home defenseman. So the third year, I played with Normie Lacombe. Normie came in as a highly touted physical specimen at age 18 that was going to get drafted in the first round. He was my right wing. So all these connections you make as a line and as a teammate, and then you come back in the summer and you see all these guys and you spend a day on the golf course with them and you spend a day down wherever, you know, down in the Portsmouth Harbor or whatever you might be, and you reconnect and you share your memories and your lives have gone in so many different directions, but it all comes back to your experience when you were together as a team at UNH. And that's the stuff that I love about the game. And that's the same application I have to what I do today. A broadcast on NESN is a team effort. You know, it's team sports. Everybody's got a job to do. They gotta love that job. They gotta want to execute that job to the best of their ability in order to put on a quality broadcast. I think we do a great job, but again, it's that whole team mentality. And I think that's what drives me, other than the natural connection I have growing up in Boston and being a Bruins fan and watching them win the Cups in 70 and 72 when I was 8 and 10, when it's tremendously impactful on your life. It makes you want to be there. It makes you want to be a hockey player. It makes you want to play for the Bruins. So why wouldn't I? You know, I mean, crazy and shame on me if I ever lose sight of the fact of how lucky I've been to have played for that team, you know, cheer for them, dream about playing for them, play for them, play for a Stanley Cup final, in the final, and now I've been doing television for 25 years. Pretty fortunate.
Taught it all into reality, Brick, all along the way. You knew you could, and you proved you could, and that's amazing. Brandy, the last question about the teammates, there's nothing more sacred than sharing a bond of winning a national championship together. So I'm sure that's something has to be the starting point of the connection forever without those teammates.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just like Ellen was saying, like once you have teammates from, my teammates from 94 to 98, who I was incredibly close with and stay in touch with, but it's really just, I'll come across kids that, played in prep hockey and that are at UNH now. And they'll come back and talk about their experiences at UNH. And you almost feel like you just have this common bond with anyone that, played hockey and attended University of New Hampshire. So yeah, no, I stay in touch with all the girls that we went through. In fact, I just spent a whole day with Sarah Cross. Her daughter's actually coming to Cushing next year. And, it's just so fun to rehash the memories and the fun stories. And Sarah Cross says, Brandy, remember when we were allotted, we all got 5 sticks for this season, and they were wooden sticks that that sort of had the same pattern, and we all had to play with it. It's almost like a piece of lumber. And how we would take the bus to this hockey shop and trade the 4 or 5 sticks that we got from UNH for 3 sticks of the stick that we wanted. And that's sort of how it was back in 94, 98. Now today kids have composite sticks or any sticks that they want. But we were just laughing about that and how it's changed so much for our daughters who play hockey now. And but and it's crazy. A lot of the girls that we played with at UNH sort of stayed in the New England area, and you'd be surprised how many of those girls have kids that are playing hockey now. Running a Dottie Catlin's daughter is actually, plays on my own daughter's hockey team. And, that's just by chance. And it's so fun to just sit around and just, talk about, our UNH days and the things that we learned and, our experiences and how amazing the culture is and, and all of that. And we often talk about, Hillary too, Coach Witt, and, it's always fun to go back and, watch a game and catch up with her and, how awesome and how lucky UNH is to have, her on board and, the amazing culture that, she's creating for the Wildcats. We have several kids that are at Cushing or kids that played at UNH that have, they beam with pride and, feel like they're part of the same family that we were. I just think that it's, UNH has done a great job creating, amazing culture and feels like family, feels like family when I see somebody that's played at UNH or, attended UNH. And a lot of that is a testament to the leaders, the coaches, Coach Umili, who was there for a long time, or Karen Kay, or, any of the coaches that have, on the girls side that have been there, but, and Hillary Witt for, keeping the UNH, that feel, the culture, the family alive, and I think that it's still there, and I absolutely love going back.
Coach, really, this question is probably unfair to you because you coach for so long. People think of you in that realm, deservedly so. But wearing the sweater, having colleagues, your playing days, how special are those bonds?
You know what? Johnny Gray's a real good friend of mine who was a great player. Ended up, I think he won the Stanley Cup with Edmonton. There's not many of former players that I play with that are around. When I first went to UNH, the majority of the guys were from Toronto, either Toronto, Quebec. There was a few guys from the Brant boys, Ryan and Bobby Brant from Minnesota. So as far as a bond with teammates that I play with at UNH, after UNH, there's not many. John Gray's probably one that I stay in touch with quite often and spend time with. But I think what everybody's saying, once you went to UNH, they made you really feel special. I mean, I coach with Coach McCurdy and Karen Kay back in the Snively Arena days. And they, along with Coach Holt, who I talked about earlier, they made you feel special. And having worn that UNH jersey, especially when we came down and played in Boston against BC and against BU. Joe Patania is a very good friend of mine, and my final UNH game, it was a consolation game. Like Brick said, there was only 4 teams. They'd take 2 teams from the East, 2 teams from the West for the Final Four, and we lost to we lost to Cornell in the semifinal game. And we had to play Harvard. And Joe Patania was the goalie, and he's a legendary hockey person. Both men and women did a lot for the women's program along with the men's. But I see a lot of him, and we tell a lot of stories about that. In my final game, we beat Harvard in the consolation game, so that's my claim to fame with Joe Patania. My final game at UNH, beating Harvard and beating Joe. And I think I scored a goal against him in that game too. So that was even special.
And of course, Joe then presented you into the Hall of Fame this past fall. So it all comes full circle, which is great.
Yeah, he brought him up. He's a great guy. He's done a lot for college hockey as well.
Family is such a big part of an atmosphere on a team, but your real family is, for better or worse, they're involved in hockey. And Coach, I'll start with you because I've met so many members of your family through the years, shared the experience. They're the ones who sacrifice, but they also share in the glory. So what can you talk about how important hockey and family is to you?
That's how I was brought up. I mean, my parents were wonderful people. Everybody hung out at my house, and my mom fed everybody. I mean, it was, we had more pasta dinners at my house than all my brother's friends, my friends, and you just learned to share, and family was important. And that's how it was at UNH. And in my years in coaching there with the team and the players, that's what was most important. And you wore the jersey, and the name on the front, we all wore the same jersey. So we were all playing for UNH. It was pretty special.
Randy, I know you mentioned this. You have an opportunity to see your own girls as they come of age playing this sport. You're coaching. What are the opportunities like for them, and how important you to share in this journey for them?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. Like I've loved watching the game evolve for them. I mean, from, it's just the opportunities have exploded. And they're right into hockey, and they're right into UNH hockey. We watch all the games on, what is it, Nesson, and they're huge UNH hockey fans. We try to make it back once a year, but they're so busy with their own hockey season, and where everybody knows what a hockey parent's life is like. We're just always running. But yeah, no, it's been amazing. I love to see where women's hockey's gone, and or where it is and where it's going, and the opportunities that they have, and like how much they love the game, and having the opportunity to coach them and be a part of that and share sort of the things that I was able to learn along the way has been amazing. So yeah, no, I'm super thankful, and I'm happy they're a part of the hockey world. That's for sure.
Ellen, safe to say family and hockey and pretty important to you. Sorry you didn't have daughters to help bring along. I understand your sons, 3 first-round draft picks, all playing in the National Hockey League. It must be pretty amazing at Thanksgiving time.
Well, it's hockey, that's for sure. So I wouldn't want it any other way. But if it wasn't for UNH and the opportunities they were providing, my life would be completely different. I probably would have stayed in the South had I not been able to come and play both soccer and hockey. And I wouldn't have met my amazing husband, who played at Providence College under Dickie. And I always joke with Dickie, like, thank goodness you didn't tell me any of his college stories before I married him. It's all after the fact, else things could have been different. But it's funny how even along the way, different UNH creeps into the men's world for my kids. Dominic Amodio, he would have played for you.
Player.
Yeah, so he coached my middle guy all the way up, and he did a lot of like individual skill stuff when Jimmy and I weren't around. Like, we did that, but he did that. We were in Toronto for 10 years, and that's where Dominic was from. And then my husband coached the Bruins for a couple of years. I don't know, Andy, if you were doing those games at that time. But there's just so many links. And then I laughed this year. I went on a mom's trip, and Luke's defensive partner couldn't be more excited to tell me, which I already knew, that he was a UNH grad and Brett Pesci. And it was fun for me to be able to talk about, what dorm were you at? And, tell me about throwing the fish on the ice. And he has such amazing things to say about UNH and his time there. So there's just so many links in this wonderful hockey world that draw you back to being a Wildcat. And by far, my kids and my life would be different had I not had the opportunity that UNH provided for me.
We're getting to the point of rapid fire questions here, as people have sent some things in. And I know, Brand, you have to sit this one out, unfortunately. Playing at Snively Arena, you have to have some thoughts or memories. So Brick, we'll start with you on what it was like at Lively Snively.
Well, I remember my freshman year and walking to Snively, and I was coming from Stoke Hall, and it was the game was 7 o'clock puck drop, and it was about 4:45. And there was this huge line in front of Snively Arena. We were playing BU that night, okay? And that's when it dawned on me the enormity of UNH hockey. They were lined up for a 7 o'clock game before 5 o'clock, trying to get general admission tickets. And that was a real eye-opener for me. That was the first real impression I had of how big this playing for UNH hockey could really be. But I remember, special games that we had there. It wasn't relegated to just the BCs and the BUs. In that decade of the 80s, Northeastern had a wagon. They were a very good program back in the decade of the 80s. And in the early 80s, they were a tough out. And we had some unbelievable games against them. I liked our playoff games that we had in there. Michigan State came in there thinking, hey, they had Western superiority. Wasn't going to beat us. That was a 2-game sweep. Playing your first game, lacing them up. I mentioned against Air Force, but I remember my first games against the most powerhouse teams and almost pinching yourself that and we always had awesome crowds. I loved that building. I liked the acoustics in that building. I liked the fan. It was almost interactive, right, Dickie, with the chain link fence at each end.
I was just gonna say the chain link fence. Oh my God.
Yeah, it was up close and personal with the fan base, and kids sneaking in that back door, the row of back doors at the end where there were no bleachers. That was always a good entry point if you didn't want to pay the price to get in. But no one game in specific really hangs with me. It was just it was the overall experience of playing in Snively, playing in front of that home crowd. And we were always a very dominant team. I love the ice, by the way. For a guy that wasn't known for being a fast skater, I felt fast on that sheet of ice because it was always the best ice in the league.
They never turned the heat on, so the ice was like hard and fast.
Ellen, any Snively memories that you can
I
bring?
was just gonna say, coldest rink in the world.
Oh,
I tell
gosh,
my
it
kids
was
all
cold.
the time. I've been on a lot of outdoor rinks. It was colder inside than it was outside.
No,
And I can remember
Okay.
games, it was so cold that I would have to take my skates off and run my feet under warm water, which I'm not supposed to do, but nobody told us that. It was cold, 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 but really the fact that we had that ice, we had so much ice. We had more ice than we knew what to do with it. That ice was for the men's and women's program. And I remember thinking at times, like, could this practice go on any longer? There was so much ice. But what an amazing space. And the other thing I was going to say, and then I'll let you go, Tiki, is the synergy and the respect between the two programs. Even back then, the men would come watch the women and the women would
Yeah.
come watch the men. And that was because of people like Coach and Russ McCurdy, and they all work together. And I just think that's incredible.
no doubt about it. There was mutual respect there. And when they started the tradition with the fish, it was in Snively Arena. And I remember we were playing Yale, and they would throw the fish right over the visiting bench because there was a balcony right there. And the equipment manager got hit in the face with the fish. And I guess he was an Italian guy, and they used to call him the Godfather, the team did. Well, obviously after that, he was the Codfather. I found out that after the fish was in his face. So there's some great memories there with that Snively Arena, but it was cold.
But Brandy, hearing all the Snively, you show up and just then this Whittemore Center opens up. What was it like playing when this building was brand new?
It was amazing. I'll never forget walking in the locker room and thinking, wow, it was state of the art. I think we were probably the facilities were probably the top of in college hockey right at the time. Am I probably right in saying that? Yeah. So my freshman year, we traveled to, it was like a half hour away. So we would practice. We would get up at 5 a.m. and go to the field house and catch a bus to a rink and rye maybe, or, not too far away. And we would practice, and then all of our games were away. But Coach Karen Kay would always say, this will be worth it. It'll be worth it. It'll be worth it. And we would watch sort of the process of the building. And it just seemed to be, it was something that when it was finished in my sophomore year, we got to play. And I think we were just so thankful to be able to play on an ice surface that, we felt pretty important, and I'll never forget it. I'll never forget the locker rooms. I really won't. I won't ever forget the ice surface, the training rooms, it was truly state of the art for its time, and thankful to have been a part of that for sure. Yeah. And the ice, I will say the ice was a little wide when I played there.
You think? Oh my gosh, it was
I know
too
they've
big.
changed that. I not to be, there's no negative. It was a beautiful building, but a little wide for us, a little big.
It's a little wide for too many teams. Believe me.
Yeah.
Hey,
So
not for you, Brandy.
that.
You did just fine on that wide,
That's right.
wide
Yeah,
thing.
a lot of room.
That's the other team.
Brandy, I'd be remiss if we didn't ask you about one of the most historical games in the history of hockey, the longest game at the time. You played and scored the game-winning goal in a 5-overtime game against Providence. What can you reflect upon when it comes to that amazing, amazing game?
Well, we were just rehashing that game I was with some teammates. I was with Sarah Cross and a couple other teammates, and we were talking about how the game went on and on and on. And Sarah said, do you remember scoring the goal? And I said, to be 110% honest, I do not remember. I remember so I think just sort of hitting the puck in, and the thing that I remember the most was, Dottie Catlin and Sarah Cross and Wendy Tatterones just, diving on me and saying it's over, we won, and and we beat Providence, and I looked over and Karen Kay was crying, and so I think it was just something that a game that I'll never forget, but also just was I think that was sort of the start of our team really gelling and really understanding how special we were in this moment in time in women's hockey. That was, I think that was the ECAC playoffs. And then there was one more, and then that was it. Became NCAA's, 1998. So yeah, no, it's never forget it. Never forget that game.
We talked so much, and we only have a few minutes left about what has happened, your experiences. I think it's important knowing there's not only alumni watching, future Wildcats. Where's UNH going from here? What's next? So Ellen, I'll start with that tough question. What's on the horizon here for UNH, and why should people stay so engaged with University of New Hampshire hockey?
Well, for starters, because we were one of the pioneers, and at the end of the day, where college sports is going is the wild, wild west, and it'll be fun to see what happens in college sports. But I think as one of the pioneers, our infrastructure in the women's game is so solid, and we will always provide a program, and we will always have a wonderful program. And I think Hillary Witt has done a great job. She's got a big recruiting class coming in. I talked to her the other day. I believe she has eight players coming in. It's not, there's a lot of programs that might have more funding that are harder for her to go up against, but there's enough players playing that she's done a great job. She has a transfer coming in from Colgate that's actually a Michigan player that I know very well, who I think will be a great addition. She has a couple U18, one that was on the U18 World Championship team. And I just think that our infrastructure's in place, and I think you should always be a Wildcat fan, and I think it's a great hidden gem for any student athlete to go to. They get so much support. Some of these big schools that have major college football, it's different. And I think it's nice on a campus like UNH, where you can be the big deal, and a smaller, student body. And I think it's a hidden gem in a perfect location. And if you want to become the best, it's a great opportunity to go play for a great program.
Yeah.
Randy, I'll turn it over to you, because your takeaway, it was just about a year ago, you were able to come back for the Patty Kazmaier presentation, as the Frozen Four was right here in the Whittemore Center. Clearly, we all want UNH to get back there. What do you see in the future?
Yeah, no, I think, just to tag on what Ellen was saying, I think, Hillary's doing an amazing job with the program. I think she's working really hard to bring in kids. But, one of the things that I think Hillary does such a great job with is just maintaining the culture. It's a special place to come back to, and it truly feels like family and home. Again, like when I get back, I feel like I never left, and I don't know that happens at all schools. To be honest, the bigger schools. And I know that, it's not just hockey, they're student athletes. And, for me, my experience at UNH as a student athlete was incredible. I mean, I was so close to, my teachers, Dr. Robert Kurtzer, who is, has passed away, but he didn't miss a game. Came to all of our games and wanted to make sure that, we were hockey players, but we were student athletes, and that was so important to the teachers. And I remember that. So I think, UNH is, having, a coach that cares and supports and understands, women's hockey, and can help girls find their way. I think it's what an amazing place to play, a great university, an hour away from Boston, awesome community, awesome family, and I actually have a very close, Kate Sullivan, who I have coached for the last 3 years, will be a freshman at UNH next year. And I am so excited for her to come to UNH. And I just keep telling her, you wait, you're going to love it. You're going to love it. You wait. This is awesome. You're going to love Hillary. You're going to love the people. You're going to love the locker room and the culture. So
We can tell you're excited. That's great. Brandy and Ellen, amazing ambassadors for the women's hockey program. Let's turn it over to the men's side. Brick, you have the widest forum to talk about hockey all the time. What's next for UNH?
Yeah, I'm excited about their future, and I say that because to me it's about coaching and, to use a professional hockey phrase, drafting and developing. You know, I'm a huge fan of Mike Souza. I think he's going to do a terrific job there. I think, you know, long-term success is in the future for the program. And that's not because of the portal and the NIL. I think the rule changing with the CHL is going to give you more and more of an opportunity, a broader scope to bring in quality hockey players, but you got to draft them right and you got to develop them right. And I think they have the ability to do that. So I'm excited for what's on the horizon for this group. But I think one of the most important things is the experience that you have when you go to UNH. And this is just a small tool that can be used in a recruiting process. But to be able to talk to people that went in there, had some level of success as athletes at UNH, and to be able to share those experiences, and what a great opportunity it is to go to UNH and have those experiences, whether you win a national championship or not, I think can go a long way into convincing and to continue to get the funding that you need. All those things together, I get excited about what's ahead for the Blue.
Yeah.
Coach Emili, I have to give you the last word. You deserve it.
Well,
how do you come up 100 years of hockey here?
Well, the most important thing right now is the renovations. We need to renovate the Whittemore Center in order to develop the players. I mean, we can go out there and recruit players, but those players want to come to a program that's going to have all of the things that are necessary for them to develop. And I'm talking about weight rooms. I'm talking about the lounge area, meeting rooms. So that's going to be really important. Coach Souza, I mean, he lived it, and his time as a UNH hockey player, I think he went to at least 2 Frozen Fours. I mean, he knows the culture. He knows what it means. I know him personally. He's a great coach. He really knows the game. I like the way he coaches. He just needs, right now, most important thing, renovation to the arena so he can recruit the players. There's no question the portal's a whole new factor. I don't know if I could have dealt with the portal. That's my beautiful dog barking in the background there. But Mike will do a great job, but we've got to help find a way to get that renovation done, and he'll make things happen there.
Nick Emili, Ellen Weinberg, Hughes, Brandy Fisher-Bailey, Andy Brickley, thank you so much for being part of today's event. We're about a minute over. That's why the dog wants to go out for a walk, so I apologize for that. But thank you all, alums and community, for being part of this. Make sure you check out the alumni website and social media accounts for one. But to our 4 excellent panelists, thank you so much for spending this with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, and thanks everybody for joining.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everybody.